Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show, and welcome to the 250th episode of the Longbox Review comic book podcast. So much like I did for the 200th comic book related episode, I decided to spotlight some comics from my collection that had reached that same number, 250. That episode 200 was released 3 years ago, if you are curious, which means I am averaging 16 and a half comic book episodes per year. My output is not great, but you know, I'm very passionate about it. So here I am still doing this after all these years. However, given the Legion Project, the Gutters, and Center Seat episodes that I have in the feed, this episode 250 is not the 250th episode that I've released. I don't know what that is. I meant to look that up, but decided not to worry about it so much. But this is what I think of as, like I said, the comic book related 250th episode. And like I said, I wanted to talk about a few of the issues 250 that are in my collection, and I have 3 of those. One is Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes from 1979, Daredevil from 1987, and Hellblazer from 2008. Given that Hellblazer is a Christmas-themed issue, I'm going to save that for a possible Gab Bag episode with George of Meanwhile at the Podcast in the future. Maybe this year, maybe some other year, who knows? But anyway, without any further preamble, I'm just going to get into these issues, these milestone issues. I'll start with Daredevil because I read that back in 87 and before the Superboy issue, which I just read to prepare for this episode. So Daredevil 250, it is titled Boom, and it is by John Romita Jr., Ann Nocenti, Al Williamson, Max Scheele, Joe Rosen, and Ralph Macchio, with a cover by Romita Jr. and Williamson. This has a cover date of January 1988 and on sale date of September 1st, 1987. Thanks to Mike's Amazing World of Comics for this kind of information. It is 23 pages long and cost me 75 cents. The very simple overview of the issue is the following. With an ecology group making waves and Matt providing legal advice from his free clinic against Kelco's chemical spills, Bullet is called in to help clean up the opposition to big business. Now, I don't think that a publisher needs to celebrate every milestone number in a publishing run, but it's also not every day that a comic book, especially these days, reaches 250 issues. Perhaps Marvel felt like this story, dealing with the topics it does, made it seem more special than it comes across as, at least for me. Then there is John Romita Jr.'s debut on the title, and that almost didn't happen. And this is information that I was reading about. I got the following from the Wikipedia entry for John Romita Jr., and so I wanted to share that with you. After he ended his first run on the Uncanny X-Men, Romita was assigned to Star Brand, one of the titles on Marvel's New Universe imprint, which featured a character that Romita was told would be Marvel's version of Superman. The title did not do well, however, in sales, and Romita could not return to the X-Men. This experience and personality conflicts that he had with those in editorial left Romita so disillusioned that he considered quitting the industry entirely. However, editor Ralph Macchio approached him one day as Romita was leaving the Marvel offices and asked him to consider working on Daredevil. Romita had never considered working on that character despite the fact that his father had done so, but Macchio said he would be paired with writer Ann Nocenti and that he would not only be allowed to do full pencils for the first time, having previously been restricted to doing only breakdowns, but would also collaborate on plots and be allowed to choose his own inker. A skeptical Romita jokingly said he wanted Al Williamson and was surprised when Williamson was confirmed a day later. His stint on Daredevil was most significant for being both the first time he was allowed to do the full pencils and the first time he had a working relationship with the writer on a series. He later remarked that I finally felt like I was part of the creation process for the first time while I was on Daredevil. In a 2017 interview with Sci-Fi Wire, Romita stated this run reinvigorated his enthusiasm for comics work, marking a turning point in his career. And some of this information is from, or a lot of this information is from that Sci-Fi Wire interview, and also back issue number 21. Okay, so with that out of the way, the cover features Daredevil fighting the lead costume antagonist, Bullet. Notice I don't call him a supervillain because I reserve that for the corporate villainy depicted in this issue. But back to the cover. Bullet is depicted almost like a battering ram, but the coloring and composition evokes the form of a giant bullet smashing into the wall where Daredevil just was. So a very striking cover. I'm going to go through this scene by scene with some commentary. And we'll just start off. Scene 1. We see a splash page showing a nuclear mushroom cloud. It's from a slideshow a grade school teacher is showing his class. The class and we see the aftermath of a nuclear explosion with dead cows on a farm and the teacher describing what he saw at Hiroshima. And this is from the issue. The teacher in the issue. I remember Hiroshima. The city was destroyed instantly. 160,000 people died. I survived. At first, all I knew was that the world had gone black. A black rain fell all day. Finally, the pitch blackness gave way. What replaced it was open, vacant land, an emptiness that had once been a city. I was astonished by the absence of the known world. I heard cries and moans. The first person I saw was a naked old man in shock who cried, "Stupid America!" over and over. What is displayed on the screen during this monologue are pictures the class drew of what they thought the post-Holocaust world would look like. The teacher complimented Lance's all-black scribbling. The artists here do an okay job of replicating simple kids' drawings. Some depict mass death via stick figures, though a couple others seem beyond the skill of kids that, to me, look like they're between 8 and 10, I think. This is where the scene loses me because I'm not sure how old these kids are, and this is something that continues on in the issue. While they appear a certain age, they seem to act older in the way they tease each other. Or, maybe kids in New York in the late 80s were different than in my neck of the woods. So anyway, the lunch bell rings and the teacher reflects on the presentation. They don't understand me, he thinks. They don't understand. Their world is too light to know such darkness. But it is my duty to tell them, show them, to never let the world forget the horror of atomic technology. He notices student Lance still sitting at his desk, apparently obsessing over the idea that nuclear Armageddon could occur at any moment, which is something that Lance is thinking over and over. There's a great visual of a mushroom cloud shown in his eyes to highlight that obsession. Again, to me, Lance looks to be maybe 10 to 12, but he represents much younger later, and I'll get into that. So we do get a bit of the theme of this issue, at least what the writer and maybe John Romita Jr. also wanted to get at. But moving on, scene 2. At the Drugs Hotline and Free Advice Clinic, Matt Murdock is being complimented by someone whom he had just given some advice. Matt says, "They're your rights. You're doing it all yourself." And the guy protests, "No, we wouldn't have known about the residential status without you. I know you're not a lawyer anymore, but your ghost lawyering of this case will win it for us. Don't be so modest. Everyone in the neighborhood is grateful for your advice clinic. We can't afford lawyers. If it wasn't for you, Matt, we'd all get abused and pushed around. You're saving my home." It's then that some mothers of the children from the previous scene barge in, complaining to Matt about the teacher. One says, "We have an emergency here. A teacher in my son's school is telling the children about the bomb." Another one, "Horror stories showing graphic photographs." A third one, "He's scaring the children. He must be fired. We have these horrid drawings done by our babies, proof of the damage he's done." Matt takes the drawings. They make a comment about how he can't see them, but he says, "Yeah, my hands see for me." And before you continue to condemn this teacher, consider this. What you don't teach your children in the schools, they learn from movies and the street. Take your choice, ladies. I love the way Matt is drawn here with a completely black glasses and a Paul Smith-like elegant simplicity of facial features, which is something that Romita Jr. is doing here across the board, really. Anyway, despite Matt's warning, he tells a clinic volunteer to take statements. He then talks to Rollins, who represents the Save the Planet nonprofit, who needs help in their case against the Kelco Adhesive Company, which made me wonder if Paste Pot Pete was a client. Anyway, also, there actually is a Kelco chemical company that's based in China, but it was founded in 1993. So that was a bit of serendipity there. Matt tells Rollins he'll go to the nonprofit's Jersey H quarters that night to review his case. He thinks to himself that he'll slice through all of Kelco's red tape and drop it around them in shreds. In both interactions, Matt has already formed an opinion and, in at least the second situation, is already contemplating his victory. Given this is after the events of Reborn, where he seemed to me to be humbled by the experience, this almost seems like a different person, at least as I recall. Or this is a perhaps natural step after. That is, he's regained his confidence and is almost attacking problems out of anger or spite or, like Daredevil does. All right, I just want to interject here because obviously I was thinking of the wrong term when I mentioned Daredevil Reborn. That obviously should be Daredevil Born Again. So the next time I say Daredevil Reborn or refer to Reborn, just replace that with Born Again. And forgive me. Sorry. It's then that a tall, thin man dressed in white enters, a man who Matt senses is carrying a tape recorder that's turned on. He tells Matt that he knows the charges against Matt that resulted in his disbarment were trumped up, but if he doesn't stop giving out free legal advice and close the clinic, he will report Matt to the law board. I mean, he's already disbarred, so I don't know what that would do. Would that bring legal proceedings against Matt for practicing law? I guess maybe that's it. Practicing law without a license? Maybe. Anyway. Scene 3. A general is talking to Bullet, explaining that Save the Planet has become a nuisance to several companies. So the general wants Bullet at the Environmentalist HQ to arrest a quote-unquote terrorist bomber, essentially putting a stop to Save the Planet's efforts. At least that's what Bullet surmises before he tacitly agrees to the plan and then punches through a two-way mirror and dragging 2 security guards through the opening. When the general objects, Bullet tells him, if they'd stood out in the open, where I could see them, fine. But see, I'm paranoid. You hide something, and I begin thinking you got something to hide. I really like this scene for the coloring and the way Bullet is designed, even if it is a tad hokey. First, the general's complexion is extremely pale. It tells us at least it tells me anyway, he's nervous, but the coloring with a pale yellow highlighting the whiteness of his skin is the same coloring used on page 1 and the mushroom cloud. It's a great visual cue linking these, bad things together. Bullet, on the other hand, is dressed all in black with white highlights to break up the mass of black in the panel and one long white stripe going down one side of his body. He wears a mask, but it's an unusual mask in that it covers his neck and most of his face, exposing only the top of his head. If you didn't get it from the cover image, he's supposed to evoke the image of a bullet. I find this stretching the concept just a wee bit. In fact, I find it a bit comical and wonder how this was ever approved. It's just so, forgive me, Nocenti and John Romita Jr., amateurish. Like a concept I would have come up with in my early teens as I created super characters for my stories. Finally, there is another nice coloring detail in the final panel. We see Bullet across the room as he is about to leave, but the camera, our viewpoint, is behind the general. We see the back of his head. And much like Bullet, the general's hair is the same color up top, though the general has white hair at the bottom. This tells me they're perhaps mirrors of one another, one weak, one strong, one who is duplicitous, one who is direct. So I found that dichotomy interesting, at least with the characters, even if the idea of this guy named Bullet is, like I said, hokey. Okay, scene 4. Foggy and Glory are at the dump site in New Jersey. Glory is snapping photos while Foggy gives us loads of exposition, like tons of exposition on one page. I couldn't believe it, about the site and how his clients are violating all sorts of rules and regulations. Glory asks him how he can represent the chemical company, and he gives her the spiel about being innocent until proven guilty, or, as he says, the whole metaphysics of justice collapses. When he asks if Glory is taking photos for her newspaper, she smiles at him, asking ever so innocently, would she do that to him? I actually hate this scene. For Foggy's sake. He comes across as being stupid, or worse, the stereotypical high-priced corporate lawyer. It reads awkwardly, both in the exposition and the characterization. And it also comes across as the writer wanting to say so much about the chemical pollution, but the artist couldn't fit everything in the script. That's in the script in the panels, because I don't know, it's just kind of it just looks like a garbage dump with some barrels and not a lot of detail. And I realize we're talking about chemicals and whatnot, but I don't know. So many words on the page, so much dialogue. Poor Foggy does not come across well here. And he's smarter than that. Come on, Nocenti. Scene 5. Karen does Daredevil's laundry as she contemplates how clean Matt himself is, as she thinks to himself, clean in heart and spirit. She realizes with her work at the clinic and her life with Matt that she's happy again and the safest girl in the city given with whom she lives. She then realizes that she hadn't washed Daredevil's mask and wonders where it is. In contrast to the previous scene, I kind of like this scene for a few reasons. One, the mundanity of having to wash a superhero's costume by hand, even in the sink, as Karen is doing. And then 2, Karen dances with the tunic when she's thinking about Matt. I found that very lovely. And 3, her musing about her life now. It's just so real and down to earth after somebody who's lived a hard life, as Karen did, before the Reborn storyline came. And then she betrayed Matt, and then he forgave her, and they're together. And so it's just really, like I said, real and down to earth. But it's undercut by this awkward transition of, I wonder where Daredevil's mask is. And then we find out in the next scene where Daredevil's mask is. And that is awkward too. All right. Speaking of that scene, Matt is at the Save the Planet's HQ. After some time reviewing documents, he knows how to pin Kelko down. He decides to stretch his legs and contemplate the props he uses in his life, pretending to be blind when he has a different kind of sight, acting clumsy and vulnerable, wearing his Daredevil mask that just happens to be in his back pocket, even though he didn't realize it the whole time. He says something like, "Gee, I hope no one saw that." Ugh. It's then that he hears something in the basement and smells something plastic. When he smells a lit fuse, he knows he has to get out before the explosion. Matt apprehends the arsonist, but is hit from behind by another. It's Bullet, who claims he'll take the terrorist into custody. Matt refuses and they tussle. After a few rounds, Bullet tells Matt he doesn't want to kill him. He's here on behalf of the government. Matt knows he's telling the truth and lets Bullet walk away with the terrorist. Matt vows to get to the bottom of this and bring those involved to justice. As with Karen, Matt contemplates his life, but while hers seems simpler and fulfilling, his is complicated and confusing. Later, he thinks through the situation. It's almost like he needs to solve this mystery, not for Save the Planet's sake, but his own, so that he can impose some order in his life. At first, I liked how the artist depicted what Matt was hearing and smelling, but the way it's drawn, it seems like we're seeing his radar sense vision of the sequence, or perhaps it's supposed to be how Matt sees things in his mind's eye. I wasn't sure. The fight scene, however, comes across as cramped given the panel layout. I also think there's an over-reliance on the use of white and yellow overall in the issue. While I liked it in those first couple scenes, the continued use of it I don't see the through line here for the use of it. But despite the fact that they're fighting, near a fire, which maybe that's probably why in this scene it's like that. Bullet is shown to be formidable. He's like a cross between Hammerhead's signature move and Kingpin's heft. He even charges head first towards Matt, who jumps out of the way just in time. But Bullet hits a metal door of a next door building or nearby building and just shrugs it off like it's nothing. So that's interesting. As far as I know, Bullet doesn't have any like metahuman powers. So he's just a big tough guy, I guess. Anyway, next scene, we're at home with Lance, who is preparing a peanut butter and chocolate sauce sandwich dinner for his dad, who turns out to be, of course, you might have guessed, Bullet. Bullet sees a mess in the apartment, which was Lance's way of preparing his home as a bunker after the inevitable nuclear fallout. Lance keeps talking about the bomb dropping and being prepared, as well as asking his dad if they can play games. Bullet warns his kid that he's getting annoyed, that Bullet's getting annoyed, and then notices an electric bill that he hasn't paid. He yells at his son for not telling him about it, and then announces he needs to get out of there. Lance protests because they were supposed to spend time together, and Bullet picks him up by the arms and tells him, "Why do you have to talk so weird, huh? Why are you such a weird kid? You want to make me explode." "No, Daddy, don't blow up. Don't blow up." Lance continues, "In the event of a nuclear holocaust, stay inside, behind thick walls, under dirt if possible. If you puke or your hair falls out, you got the radiation sickness." "Lance? But if you don't, just keep windows blocked, eat canned food, don't go outside, don't breathe. Shock blast, fission vaporization, afterbursts, thermo wave, black rain, nuclear winter, extinction, ashes to ashes." "Lance, shut up." "Fireball, shock blast." Shh, easy," Bullet says. "Come on, kid. The world ain't gonna blow up. I'm not gonna blow up. I'll stay here tonight." "Mutual assured destruction." "Shh. I'll stay with you. We'll have a good time. Just be quiet. Please be quiet." As I said, Lance presents here as much younger than I thought he was in the first scene. When making the sandwich, his head just clears the counter, so he's either young or short or both. I'm not sure. The way Lance thinks to himself about the coming apocalypse and how he needs to prepare makes it seem like he's the older kid I thought he was at first. But then the way he talks to his dad, he appears as young as John Romita Jr. draws him, which is again a continuing inconsistency that draws me out of the story a bit. And this scene in particular, because what is shown is a strained relationship, but they obviously care for one another. And where's the mother? The fact that Lance wants his dad to live there with him, but Bullet tells him yet again he cannot because of what he does, makes me wonder if the mom isn't around and Bullet just lets the kid live there alone? Yikes. Maybe some of this is addressed in the next issue, but I didn't reread that, and I don't remember the details. But I really like this scene. The dad's a bit much. So is Lance, but obviously that presentation really affected him, and at least the dad eventually comes around and appears to be a good dad in that regard. And then finally, the epilogue of the issue. Matt is back at the clinic, and the lawyer from earlier is back, this time with an injunction to close the clinic and a summons for Matt to appear before the law board and, quote unquote, answer for his crimes. To be continued. As I said previously, this milestone issue of Daredevil is just another story, one in which Daredevil actually doesn't appear in except on the cover. Even if his costume does. And the story is, weirdly told. Given the weight of the nuclear bomb aspect and how it clearly affects Lance, not to mention the thematic connection to the chemical waste part of the issue, it seems like writer Nocenti maybe John Romita Jr. as well, really had some thoughts to get out about the immoral use of technology and man's greed outstripping his moral and ethical obligations. And they had to toss in some superhero-like scenes as well. Just, it is a superhero comic. John Romita Jr. does his best to tell the story, I think, but everything here doesn't quite gel for me. Maybe it's partly because Nocenti was working with a new artist. They were, just paired up. Who knows? I remember feeling disappointed with this issue when I first read it back in '87, and that opinion has only gotten stronger with this reread. Nocenti had been writing Daredevil for close to a year and a half at this point, with a few other fill-in issues from other people. And I don't recall not enjoying her issues generally during this time, post-Reborn. She and John Romita Jr. would work on Daredevil until issue 282, so another 30-some issues, with, a few other fill-in artists along the way. Bullitt himself appeared in 34 other issues across Marvel's publishing line, 16 of those in various Daredevil issues, including the next one, which I think concludes this particular story, but he shows up later. Okay. Going from just another issue in the line to something that is, on the surface at least, a celebration of 250 issues, let's get to Superboy number 250. It's titled, This is the Day the Universe Dies, which I believe is also the title of the first chapter. This is by Steve Apollo, Paul Levitz, Dave Hunt, Gene D'Angelo, Ben Oda, and Jack C. Harris, with a cover by Joe Staton and Dick Giordano. Has a cover date of April 1979 and an on-sale date of January 25th, 1979. It is 20 pages, and it was 40 cents. I've got two different synopses of this issue. One from the DC database wiki, which is the following: Omega, the quote living embodiment of all hate that has ever existed, unquote, threatens the universe and the Legion, but can they stop it and the Legionnaire who created him? And then, just for fun, I went to look up this issue on the DC Universe Infinite app, and this is what they have for this. Chameleon Boy announces that Ultra Boy was framed for the murder of Anne Ridd, but before the full truth comes out, the Legion must deal with the threat of Omega, a giant creature claiming to be the embodiment of all hate in the universe. So, pretty much the same thing, but I like DCUI's synopsis a little better. Although, boy, let me tell you, they do some bad synopses sometimes. Anyway. Like I was saying, this cover is more like it in terms of taking a celebratory approach. Superboy is bursting through a cover composed of covers, with the founders right behind him and a few other Legionnaires in the background: Brainiac 5, Chameleon Boy, and Shadowlass. Curiously, some more alien-looking ones to maybe contrast all of the whiteness of the other four, perhaps? I'm sure they were not thinking of this at the time. In the lower right is some text that declares, "Congratulations, Superboy, on your spectacular 250th issue." And if you're curious, the issues that are the cover that Superboy is bursting through are Superboy issues 1, 86, 96, 125, 157, 197, 198, and 202. Not sure why they chose those. I'd be curious to actually find out why those particular issues, but it was fun to look them up anyway. Because some of them were kind of hard to figure out. I had to look at, because I couldn't see what the number was. I had to look at the art that I could see and then match it up to the issues that they were. So now you may have noticed that I said Steve Apollo in a certain way, and you may be wondering who Steve Apollo is, as I was. Anyway, Steve Apollo is, first of all, he was credited as the writer and layout artist. It's actually Jim Starlin. This and the next issue, 251, was originally intended as a 64-page Legion story for the DC Special Series title. But the DC implosion happened, and the powers that be decided to repurpose Starlin's story for the Superboy series. Because of that, the rewrites Paul Levitz had to do and a different inker to finish Starlin's layouts than what he wanted, Jim pulled his name from the credits. One of the interesting artifacts of the original story is why Wildfire is ordering everyone around in it, as you'll hear in a little more detail. I point this out because Lightning Lad was elected as Legion leader in Superboy number 247. Starlin's story was written before that and has Wildfire acting as leader, as was appropriate at the time. Some dialogue changes in this issue attempt to cover for this by Wildfire mentioning that he was leader, or that when he was leader, he asked Cam to investigate events that happened earlier, and with Element Lad giving some commands in his capacity as deputy leader. But as I said, Wildfire continually bosses everybody around throughout the story. Funny continuity glitch I'll mention here. With this whole thing, Element Lad states that in Lightning Lad's absence, he commands some Legionnaires to go search out the threat, but Lightning Lad is clearly shown in a few panels prior. Oops. As I said, this is a couple chapters, long chapters, and here's chapter 1. Chameleon Boy sits slumped in a chair because he knows, quote, one of our own members has betrayed us. He lingers on this thought for another minute before the mysterious hooded figure, whom we last saw, I believe, trying to frame Ultra Boy for the murder of Anne Ridd in issue 239, as I mentioned, appears holding a gun on Cam. Cam tells him, I don't know how you could have hidden your madness for so long, or why you want to destroy the universe. All I know is who you are. And he starts to pull the hood from the hooded figure. And who replies, that particular bit of knowledge was your undoing. Artistic license there on my part. And then the hooded figure shoots Cam. Hours later, Wildfire discovers his fallen comrade. Once he realizes Cam is not dead, he takes the Durlin's flight ring so he can access the coded duplicate tape, as they had agreed upon. He then calls all Legionnaires back to their HQ. Quote, we have a Class 1 emergency on our hands. Cam's really big ears make a return, last seen in issue 239, thanks to Starlin, which I always kind of liked when I saw it, which would have been 239. And I thought maybe other issues, but I looked and I didn't see anything. So I don't know. I had this idea that during that time, around the time that 239 was published, that maybe they decided to change Cam's look a little bit. But then I found out they did not. I mean, sometimes his ears are a little taller than artists draw them differently is my point. But these are really big. They're like taller than his entire head. So he definitely looks more like a bat than he's normally portrayed as. But anyway, I kind of liked it. Like I said, makes him look a little more alien. When we first see the hooded figure, it's his left leg that's shown in this issue. And given how that's drawn, retroactively, you could maybe perhaps easily guess who he was. Wildfire seems a bit too cavalier about finding his friend unconscious on the floor. He might still be alive, but maybe needs immediate critical care. And despite him announcing that he will call the Meta Center, he first takes Cam's ring and then calls the Legion home. Presumably, he then calls for medical help, in the gutters. All right, moving on. After nearby Legionnaires have arrived at the clubhouse, Wildfire provides a history lesson about the events in issue 239 and Cam's investigation into who was behind it all. He eventually tells the assembled heroes that, quote, whoever was behind the framing of Ultra Boy is a Legionnaire. It's then that the hooded figure instantly appears among them, laughing. Tyrock demands to know who this person is, and he replies, quote, I am the Herald of Death, and I've come to pronounce your doom. Both Karate Kid and Timberwolf attack him, but their fists go through his intangible form, apparently. Brainiac 5 tells them it's a hologram. The hooded man continues, I have come to tell you that the girl's death was but the first move in a game of universal proportions. The rules are mine, and yours are the roles of pawns. And now the game will really begin. You will face the ultimate evil and fall before it. And when you have all fallen, the universe ends. A simple game, is it not? Wildfire says, charming, but what if we decide not to play? Then you lose, Wildfire, of course. You lose either way. Fighting is more sporting, naturally, and far more interesting. But in the end, it won't matter at all. Insert cackle here. Actually, I don't know if he actually cackled there. I don't remember, but it seems like, that's something he would do. It's then the mission monitor board alert goes off, with Timberwolf offering, weird. It's not supposed to react like that to anything this side of a Sun Eater. Superboy, using his supervision, traces the source of the signal to deep space, and he and Mon-El are told to check it out. When Wildfire announces a traitor in their midst, there's a page-wide reaction shot of the assembled Legionnaires, with most expressing shock. Mon-El looks angry, and Brainiac 5 has a peculiar expression. It's subtle, so Starlin and Hunt did a good job offering a clue in retrospect. And, like I was implying, the hooded guy is just so over the top. He reminds me of Pulsar Stargrave, and that's who I thought the antagonist was when I read issue 239 all those years ago. Side note, 239 holds a special place in my heart because that is the issue that made me basically fall in love with Ultra Boy as one of my favorite Legionnaires. I started reading Legion comics monthly, starting with the Reflecto Saga, and Ultra Boy was front and center in that story, but it was that murder mystery issue, which I purchased after the Reflecto story at a local comic shop, that made him one of my favorites for a very long time. I mean, he still is, but he's not my favorite Legionnaire. I like the shorthand they're using in this scene, namely Timberwolf's mention of the Sun Eater. People who are reading Legion for a while at that time, if that danger is invoked, really bad stuff could happen. But will the threat live up to the hype? Continuing on, the two most powerful Legionnaires head out into space, and Superboy eventually spots, quote, shimmering energy out in intergalactic space. Energy that made Superboy feel its hate light years away. They arrive to find Omega, a large yellow being, I'm going to guess about 20 feet tall, with 3-fingered hands, 2-toed feet, and green splotches all over his flaming body. Omega declares, your mind is too feeble to encompass the true concept of what I am, mortal. I am death, destruction, the end of everything you know and love in this universe. I am the sum total, the very living embodiment of all the hate that ever has existed. And I will be the fulfillment of that hate, for I am Omega. And of all the creatures in this cosmos, it is you Legionnaires that I hate the most. Mon-El attacks Omega, but it has no effect on the creature. Omega tells them that it will end all of eternity when he reaches Legion HQ and then clocks Mon-El, hurtling the Daxamite away. Superboy quickly realizes it would be futile to engage Omega in the same way, so he leaves to attend to Mon-El, who has a concussion from a single blow. Omega then strides off, covering light years of space in seconds. So Starlin and Levitz are really playing up the hate angle. After all, how does a Superboy feel hatred from energy that he sees light years away and from intergalactic space? I probably shouldn't pick on this detail too much because a similar situation was used in the Great Darkness saga years later, but at least there was a physical proximity to engage that feeling in the Legionnaires in that story. As Mon-El punches Omega, Superboy invokes Validus, comparing Omega's toughness to that other giant antagonist. Omega tells them that he doesn't know Validus, quote, for hate is not within him, unquote. Given what we learn about Validus many years later, that makes sense. And I wonder if Levitz kept this line in mind when he developed the origin of Validus? If not, what a great accidental through line. And finally, if you thought Omega might just be your run-of-the-mill, superpowered villain of the issue, his apparent ease at which he damages Mon-El shows that he's not. So at least, Omega so far is living up to the hype of the promise here. Anyway, here we are at Chapter 2, which is titled Madman in Our Midst. Brainiac 5 is examining Mon-El, confirming Superboy's diagnosis. Wildfire reminds everyone that Omega's on its way and only they could stop it. Superboy replies, quote, "I'd rather face the Sun Eater again," unquote. Wildfire describes his plan of deploying teams to engage Omega and then wonders why Omega needs to come to the clubhouse to destroy the universe. It's then that he decides to ask the mastermind behind the curtain, who is Brainiac 5. While others gasp in shock, Brainiac 5 just smiles, affirming the accusation. When Wildfire accuses him of being mad, Brainiac replies, "No, Wildfire, my time has come. After all these years of solving the universe's problems, I'm collecting my due reward. I'm taking the universe's life in trade." "You're a fool, Wildfire. You always were. It's not madness, you see. It's hatred. The hatred that drives me to destroy you, to destroy the universe. The hatred that gave birth to Omega. With the power my hatred and my genius have given Omega, he can crush you all. For he has all of you within him, all of your petty little hates." "Then why hasn't he finished us off before, Brainy?" Timberwolf asks. "Because I had to give him the final gift, Timberwolf, the last trump that will end it all. Right here, in this sham you call a citadel of justice, is what Omega needs. With it, he can overcome the balancing forces of love that have kept his incarnate hate from triumphing. So even as we speak, he is walking across the stars towards Earth, and you cannot stop him. Then Omega will seize the secret and destroy us all. And in that moment, I shall have my revenge." The team stares at their teammate with concern and sadness. Then Wildfire tells Karate Kid and Princess Projector to escort Brainiac 5 to a detention cell and the rest of them to, quote, "organize according to Defense Beta 2, unquote, and they scatter. Dreamgirl pulls Wildfire aside to tell him she had a premonition that he faces Omega alone and, quote, "then the world seemed to explode," unquote. Wildfire pushes the news aside and wants her to dream up, quote, "why Brainy's having an Omega come here instead." As the Legionnaires depart Earth, Wildfire says he has one thing to do: get Brainiac 5 to tell him what the secret to the universe ending is, one way or another. And the issue ends with the end? So, did you guess it was Brainy? Did you buy his reasoning? I mean, yes, he's supposed to be crazy and all that, but destroying the universe because you're not appreciated enough? Regardless, I love how the artists depict the rage and madness on Brainiac 5's face in these panels. The uncharacteristic haughty smiles and the abject anger that on the next page descends into madness, complete with the unkempt hair and nearly crossed eyes. It's just, Starlin at his best, I think. And then there's that wonderful silent reaction panel of the Legionnaires just staring at him with those concerned looks, despite what he's just admitted to. Wonderfully done, even if I hate that Brainiac 5, who is my favorite Legionnaire, is the bad guy of the story. Given that issue 239 introduced the hooded villain we now know was Brainiac 5, when did he go insane? I thought it would be fun to go through the earlier issues to see if there's anything to support his condition as revealed here. And I can see where they were working towards something. Brainiac 5 is cranky and abrasive towards his teammates, but I didn't see much to support a descent into madness, which is, I suppose, the point. But still, if your big reveal is this, hopefully you're building up to it. But I think most, if not all, those issues leading up to this were written by Jerry Conway. This is written by Jim Starlin, which is a sequel to Starlin's issue 239. I don't know. It's just maybe Conway knew something was or this was in the works. But regardless, would Starlin have, in his original version, would he have restored Brainiac 5's sanity by the end of the story? Why did Levitz choose to keep Brainy insane and as an antagonist, besides the obvious? After all, only a few issues later was my first Legion issue, which was 254. And while Brainiac 5 is in a mental institution, he's hardly shown as hate-filled as he's portrayed here. But perhaps that is the remarkable 20th century medical treatments on display. With Brainiac 5 being revealed as the mastermind who framed a fellow Legionnaire and created a universal threat in Omega, this definitely feels more like what a milestone issue should be. Okay, Marvel? I know that's not fair. Although, while I love the Legion with all my heart, it doesn't feel like a celebration of Superboy, given that this is Superboy's 250th issue, despite what the cover declared. Superboy only really gets one good scene, and that's the one with Mon-El, and he doesn't really contribute anything through the whole issue. I'm also disappointed that Ultra Boy didn't have more to do in this issue, considering how Brainiac 5's plans started with framing him for his old Flame's murder. Next issue is the conclusion of the story, and I've read it to see how it all pans out. And if you think I had qualms about this issue, well... Anyway, if you've read the Omega story, I'm very interested in what you think. All right. So, what did you think of these 250th issues? What issues number 250 do you have that are your favorites and why? Please let me know. Please send back about this episode to longboxreview@gmail.com. Leave voicemail or text me at 208-953-1841 or contact me via social media at Longbox Review, especially in Blue Sky, where I am most active. If you're so inclined, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now Pocket Casts, which is my podcast player of choice. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.